Friends, good morning. I am Pastor Michelle, and I am the pastor at Harmony Creek Church. And this morning I wanted to go ahead and give my sermon for those who may not be able to make it to church this morning or join us on Zoom. So my sermon this morning is all about the Sermon on the Mount. It centers around that, and that we're using the one that is found in the Gospel of Matthew, because there's actually another one found in Luke, and that one is called Sermon on the Plain. And there's some changes to that one, but many believe the two sermons are the same. But for today, we're focusing on the one that's found in Matthew. And so, my friends, I thought I would read you the passage from Matthew and then dive right into my sermon. And I'm also going to be speaking on Micah as well, a passage from Micah. So the reading from Matthew. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." And then the reading from Micah. "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God." And so, my friends, this morning, we're talking about one of Jesus's most famous sermons. You know, Jesus was many things. He was a healer. He was a prophet. He was a rabbi. He also was a preacher. I think a lot of what he talks about is kind of in preacher ways, right? When he gives the parables, for example. And in this passage from Matthew, we find him on top of a mountain giving a sermon. And we find that he's kind of separated himself from the crowds to speak these words to his disciples. I think Matthew is pointing out that these words are specifically meant for his followers, his disciples. He's telling them how to live in this world and how to follow him. And the location of this teaching is on a mountain. And I think that recalls the moment someone else stood on a mountain and gave divine commandments to his people. Of course, I'm talking about Moses. You know, just as God gave the law to Moses in Exodus, here we find Jesus giving divine blessings to his disciples. But not only giving divine blessings to his disciples, he's showing them that even those who aren't, those who are on the margins, those who the world most of the time ignores, they are blessed just as much as the disciples are blessed. He's giving them these teachings, and they will teach these teachings to a church that's composed of people from all nations. And the thing is, if we want to understand what Jesus is saying to us from this passage in 2026, we have to first understand what he was saying to then and how radical it really was. Because when we're looking at scripture, it's important to realize that the Bible was not written for us. Not with us in mind. It was written for an ancient people. That is something we talked a lot about during my Bible study last month, when we were discussing the book of Genesis. The Bible is contextual. You have to remember that the Bible is written for ancient people. And then we can come to the scriptures, and decide what is it saying for us. But what Jesus was saying to his followers back then, I think, is applicable to us now. You know, the kind of world that Jesus lived in back then, Jesus lived in a world that believed blessing belonged to the powerful, belonged to the strong, belonged to the rich. Blessed were the wealthy. Blessed were the religious leaders. Blessed were the people who had it all together. That's the kind of people that were blessed back in Jesus' time. And one could say that there's a certain understanding of that in our world today. Those who are blessed are the ones that have all the good stuff. But Jesus stands on this mountaintop, right, and looks at his followers, and he flips the whole script upside down, because that's just what Jesus does. He's a flipper, a world flipper. That may not be the right word. But he flips the world upside down. He flips the script upside down, the script that says that some people are more blessed than others. He flips that all on its side. And he says, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who are persecuted. You know, Jesus, I think in this moment, he's thinking about the people who had been told by religion, by empire, by other religious leaders, by society, that they were not blessed, that they were unclean, that they were not worthy. And he says, guess what? You are blessed. He says they are blessed. Those invisible people, they're blessed just as much as you are. Perhaps that's what he's saying to his disciples. And they're blessed not someday, not if they change, not if they get it all together, but now. They're blessed right now. You see, the Sermon on the Mount isn't Jesus handing out these instructions necessarily. It's not a checklist. It's not a prayer he's teaching the disciples, a prayer that you pray just so you can get into heaven. Jesus starts this passage, this scene, by simply blessing people. No requirements necessary. And I think that alone is revolutionary, because back in Jesus' time, and especially in the Old Testament times, right, that people would come to God and they would have to bring sacrifices. They would have to give something to God in order to receive the blessing. But Jesus, in this moment, is simply just throwing out blessings. And I think when we think about Jesus, I think his central mission around something that was foundational to what he was all about was to make sure that people knew this truth, that everyone is made in the image of God, imago Dei. From the loneliest person on the margins, even to the most powerful person in the room. As I think about the story of Nicodemus, a religious leader who was part of the very privileged class, and Jesus spends time with him. But Jesus also spends a great deal of time with those whom society pushed aside, or those whom the world had declared unclean. Because for Jesus, there was no limit to who he would love. There was no boundary to his compassion. There was no category of person beyond God's image, beyond God's grace, beyond God's love. The theologian Master Eckhart said, the divine image lives in all of us. And I love that a divine spark that he talks about, it lives in all of us. And I love how The Chosen, the TV show that is all about Jesus, The Chosen captures this Sermon on the Mount, the portrayal of the Sermon on the Mount, in a very unique way. And I love it because it shows Jesus before he's standing next to one of his disciples. And he says, before he starts to preach this sermon, he says, this is a map. And after he preaches, he looks out at the crowd, right? And before Jesus preaches, he looks at the crowd and says, this is a map. Then he preaches. And then after he says, blessed are ... after he says all those blessings, his disciple who is standing next to him says, well, Jesus, how is this a map? And Jesus says, well, it's directions in a way. It's where you will find me. You will find Jesus with the poor. You will find him with the grieving. You will find him with the persecuted. You will find him in the faces the world ignores. Whenever someone builds a wall, you will find Jesus on the other side pulling people across, or perhaps helping others to knock the wall down. Where people might be putting up lines that separate us from one another, Jesus is coming around with a big old eraser and erasing those lines. There's a great Naked Pastor cartoon which depicts that. So because I really think about movies a lot when I preach, I can't help but think about an extraordinary movie that I went and saw for like the 5th or 6th time. I've seen it in a while, but they re-released it in the theaters. And I'm talking about the Lego Movie. Now, in the Lego Movie, the main character, Emmett, is ordinary. He blends in. He follows all the rules. He always needs instructions. He always needs to be told what to do. And there's nothing flashy about him. He blends in so well that he's almost invisible. Until one day he finds something very unique, something special, something called the piece of resistance. And then he's told, because he found that piece, that he is the special, that he is the chosen one, destined to save the world. He's the one this prophecy speaks of. But Emmett can't understand how he could be the chosen one. He was no master builder. Master builders were people who could build amazing things out of the Lego pieces. And the most amazing thing that Emmett had built was a double-decker couch, a bunk bed couch, if you will, where there's a couch and then a couch on top of the couch. Maybe not the best idea. Later in the movie, we have this twist, though. We find out that the prophecy actually isn't real. And that turns out to be good news because it helps Emmett realize that, he's not special because he's the only one. He's special because everyone is special. Every person has something to contribute. Every person in his world can help build a better world. And in the Lego Movie, the piece of resistance turns out to be a cap to a bottle of crazy glue. Now, our piece of resistance is not a cap to crazy glue. I think our piece of resistance is the truth that every human being is made in the image of God. That all of us have the divine spark that Master Eckhart talks about. That's our piece of resistance, I think. That brings us to our passage from Micah, one of my favorite passages. We find the people asking God, what do you want from us? Do you want more sacrifices? Do you want bigger offerings, more religious performance? And what does God say? God doesn't say, yeah, that's exactly what I want. No, God says, do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. That's it. I love this passage from Micah because it gives us words to live by. And I think about our person of the week, Mary McLeod Bethune. She wasn't extraordinary, I would say, by the world's standards, right? She was ordinary and she was faithful. She took Micah 6:8 seriously. She used her gifts. She showed up. She built something that was lasting. And I think about us. We can be like Emmett. Maybe we're more like Emmett. Maybe we're more like Mary, right? We're all like Lego pieces. We're all built a little different. We're all different. But every piece matters. We're building something together. The question is, what are we building? And I would like to think that we are building a better world as best as we can. And right now it doesn't, we're living in some really interesting times. And I think things will continue to get even more interesting as time goes on. And when I say interesting, even more dangerous too. I think for today, I wanted to remind us all of who we are. We are made in God's image. We are called to be salt and light. And we're going to talk about that more next week. But for now, I want us to rest in the fact that we are special. All of us. We each have that piece of resistance, that divine image that's marked on every single one of us. And I think we need to remember that we too can go out and make a difference. I don't know exactly how to respond to everything going on with ICE. I will say this, I am terrified because I know that Springfield, Ohio is about to be torn apart. Springfield, Ohio may become the next Minneapolis, and that is terrifying to me because Springfield is in our neighborhood. Springfield is our neighbors. And I just wonder, how are we going to show up? How can we show up? I don't necessarily feel called to go to the front lines and put my life on the line, but what I do feel called to is I feel called to be your leader, your spiritual leader during a time like this, for such a time like this. I feel called to support you all and for us to work together to be a source of support and encouragement. And what can we do? There's so many different ways that we can help support our Haitian neighbors. And just remember that every single one of us has certain gifts to bring to the table. Our piece of resistance matters. Who we are matters. And so I think I just want to remind us that even when the world seems to be falling apart all around us, we too can help put it back together. We too can use whatever gifts that we feel God has given us to make this world a better place. And I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but it will take all of us. And remember, it's okay if you're not feeling called to go to the front lines. Maybe you feel called to just donate money. Maybe you feel called to just give to local businesses. There's so many ways that we can continue building something better. I think the important thing is that we continue to just show up as your most authentic self. So my friends, let's keep building this world together as best as we can. And may you always know that you are blessed, not because of anything you've done, but you're blessed just because of who you are. You are God's beloved through and through. God bless you all.